Ma'am, look, hurry. The terrified scream of the bank teller shattered the silence like a knife. Her face was deathly pale, devoid of any color, and her hands trembled as she clutched the black card I had just handed her. I was stunned. I couldn't believe my eyes. Just 24 hours earlier, my daughter-in-law had heartlessly kicked me out of the house, right after the mourners had left my son's funeral. She had sneered, "You're useless. Don't even think about coming back here to live off us." She thought she had won, thought she had gotten rid of a worn-out old woman forever. But at that moment, as everyone in the bank turned to look at me, as the screen began flashing a red warning incessantly, I understood one thing crystal clear. This was only the beginning. My name is Martha Thorne. I'm 65 years old, and the story I'm about to tell you changed my life forever. I still remember that day, how the rain never stopped falling. It just kept falling, harder and colder. I stood on the front porch, watching the last black sedan pull away from the curb. The taillights blurred into red streaks against the gray afternoon, fading until they were gone. The funeral was over. Everyone had left. The polite neighbors, the distant cousins, David's colleagues from the tech firm, they all went back to their warm lives. Now, it was just me. And the silence. I turned around to go back inside. The house was warm, but it felt empty. The air still smelled of the lilies from the service, a scent that was too sweet, almost suffocating. I just wanted to sit in David's old armchair. I just wanted to close my eyes and pretend this day never happened. But Linda, my daughter-in-law, was blocking the doorway. She wasn't wearing black anymore. She had already changed into a sharp, navy blue business suit. Her face was dry, not a single tear. She looked at me not like a daughter-in-law looking at a grieving mother, but like a landlord looking at a tenant who had overstayed their lease. "Martha," she said. Her voice was flat. "We need to talk." I blinked, wiping a mixture of rain and tears from my cheek. "Can it wait, Linda? Please. I'm so tired." "It can't wait," she cut in. She didn't move aside to let me pass. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. She thrust it toward my chest. I took it instinctively. My hands were shaking so much the paper rattled. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a notice," Linda said, crossing her arms. "David is gone. This house is in my name and his. Now that he's dead, the title reverts entirely to me. I'm selling it." I looked at her, unable to comprehend the words. "Selling it? Today? We just buried him 2 hours ago." "But where will I go?" I stammered. "This is my home. David brought me here after." "It was your home," Linda corrected me coldly. "Now, it's my asset. And honestly, Martha, I don't want any trouble. I don't want a roommate, especially not one who doesn't contribute." She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "You are extra baggage, Martha. That's all you are." I felt a physical blow to my chest. Extra baggage. I looked past her, into the foyer where I used to fold David's laundry, where I played with little Leo before Linda sent him away to that boarding school. "You can't do this," I whispered. "I can. And I have." She snapped her fingers. A van I hadn't noticed before, parked down the street, started its engine. A man in blue coveralls walked up the driveway, carrying a drill and a toolbox. A locksmith. She had planned this. She had called a locksmith while her husband was being lowered into the ground. "You have 5 minutes to take your personal items," Linda said, checking her watch. "The locks are being changed now. Anything you leave behind goes to the trash." I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like lead. I wanted to scream, to slap her, to demand to see my grandson. But the grief. It was too heavy. It crushed the fight out of me. I was just an old woman who had lost her only son. I had nothing left to fight with. I stumbled into the hallway. I grabbed my small, battered suitcase from the closet. I didn't have much. Just some clothes, my Bible, a few photos. "Hurry up!" Linda yelled from the door. I went into David's study. I wanted to take something of his. Anything. A book, a pen. "Don't touch the electronics," Linda's voice echoed. "Those have value." I saw an old shoebox on the top shelf. It was dusty. David used to keep his childhood treasures in there. I reached for it. Suddenly, Linda was there. She grabbed the box from my hands. She shook it. It rattled. Nothing heavy. Nothing expensive. "Fine," she sneered. Take this junk. She shoved the box into my chest, hard. I nearly lost my balance. Then, she grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, painful. She guided me. No, she pushed me, back toward the front door. Out, she said. I stumbled onto the porch. The rain was pouring down now, a sheet of ice-cold water. Linda, please. I turned back, one last time. It's raining. I have nowhere to go. She looked at me. There was no pity in her eyes. Only annoyance. Not my problem, she said. She stepped back and slammed the door. Then, I heard it. Click. The deadbolt sliding into place. A dry, metallic sound that echoed louder than thunder. Then the whir of the drill started. The locksmith was doing his job. I stood there for a long time, the rain soaked through my black coat, chilling me to the bone. I looked at the closed door. The wreath I had made for David was still hanging there, wet and drooping. I had lost my son in the morning, and I had lost my home in the afternoon. I looked down at the suitcase in my left hand, and the dusty shoebox clutched against my chest in my right. This was it. This was my entire life now. I turned away from the house. I walked down the driveway, my old shoes squelching in the puddles. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I walked to the corner of the street and fumbled for my phone. My fingers were numb. I dialed a taxi service. Where to? The dispatcher asked, his voice bored and static-filled. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I checked my wallet. I didn't have much cash. I needed somewhere cheap, somewhere no one would ask questions. The Motel 6, I said, my voice breaking. The one out on the highway. 10 minutes. I stood under the shelter of a bus stop, shivering. The city looked gray and hostile. I held the shoebox tighter. It was the only piece of David I had left. I'm sorry, David, I whispered to the rain. I'm so sorry. The yellow cab pulled up, splashing water onto the curb. I opened the door and climbed in, leaving the life I knew behind in the storm. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the hum of the ice machine down the hall. The mattress was lumpy, sagging in the middle. The sheets felt thin and rough against my hands. This was a Motel 6 on the edge of town, right off the interstate. Every few seconds, the room vibrated slightly as a semi-truck roared past. It was a long way from the quiet, tree-lined street I had lived on for 10 years. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 8:14 p.m. My stomach growled, a low, painful rumble. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I hadn't eaten since before I buried my son. But the thought of food made me nauseous. On the small, scratched table by the window, the shoebox sat waiting. It was just an old cardboard box, the corners reinforced with yellowing Scotch tape. Nike was printed on the side in faded orange ink. It was the only thing I had managed to salvage from David's study before Linda shoved me out the door. I reached out and pulled the lid off. A smell drifted up. It was the smell of old paper, pencil shavings, and dust. The smell of memory. I peered inside. There were no diamonds. No stacks of cash. Just toys. I reached in and picked one up. It was a lead soldier, heavy and cold. The paint on its uniform was chipped, revealing the gray metal underneath. The soldier was holding a rifle, frozen in a pose of eternal vigilance. Tears pricked my eyes again. I remembered when David got these. He was 8 years old. We were at a garage sale. He had begged me for them, clutching his allowance, a handful of quarters and dimes, in his sweaty little fist. I need them to protect the fort, Mom, he had said. His eyes were so serious back then. I ran my thumb over the chipped paint. He used to set them up on the living room rug, creating elaborate battles that spanned from the sofa to the TV stand. He was the commander. I was the medic, always ready with a band-aid or a cookie when a soldier fell. You protected them, David. I whispered to the empty room. But who protected you? I set the soldier down on the bedspread. Beside it, I placed a few marbles, a rusted compass that didn't point north anymore, and a heavy brass key that belonged to a house we lived in 30 years ago. At the bottom of the box, beneath a layer of old baseball cards, my fingers brushed against something smooth. Leather. I pulled it out. It was a wallet. Not his current one. Linda had taken that along with his watch and his wedding ring. This was an old one. Brown leather, cracked at the spine, stitching coming loose at the corners. It was the wallet he used in college. I opened it. It was empty. The clear plastic slots where photos used to be were yellow and cloudy. I sighed, feeling a wave of exhaustion crash over me. What was I looking for? A miracle? Linda was right. I was just an old woman with a box of junk. I moved to close the wallet, but my thumb felt something stiff. I paused. The leather backing behind the bill compartment felt thick. Too thick. I brought the wallet closer to the lamp. The light flickered. There, tucked deep inside the lining, was a small slit. It looked like someone had carefully cut the stitching with a razor blade. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. With trembling fingers, I widened the slit. I saw the edge of a card. I pinched it and pulled. It slid out silently. It was a credit card. But it wasn't like any card I had ever seen. It wasn't plastic. It felt like metal. Heavy. Cold. It was matte black, pitch black. There was no bank logo. No picture, no expiry date. On the front, there was only a silver chip and a name embossed in small silver letters, Huenix Trust. And below that, authorized beneficiary. I turned it over. On the back, there was a magnetic strip and a signature panel. The signature was David's. What is this? I breathed. I looked back at the wallet. There was something else in the slit. A piece of paper, folded into a tiny square. I unfolded it. The paper was thin, like onion skin. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was messy, hurried. David always wrote like his mind was moving faster than his hand. I adjusted my glasses, squinting in the dim light. Mom, if you are reading this, then I'm gone. And if you have this box, it means Linda has done exactly what I feared she would do. I gasped. The air left my lungs. He knew. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to believe she would change. I wanted to believe that if I worked harder, if I earned more, she would be kind to us, but I was wrong. I've been sick for a while, Mom. I didn't want to worry you. He knew he was dying? He never told me. He told me it was sudden. A heart attack. But he knew. I continued reading, the letters blurring as my eyes filled with water. I couldn't leave my assets to her. She would waste it all, and she would leave you with nothing. So I moved everything. This card is the key. Go to the Sovereign Trust Bank in the city center. Ask for Mr. Sterling. Use this card, PIN, your birthday. Do not tell anyone. Not Linda, not your friends, no one. This is for you. And for Leo, when he's old enough. You were never a burden, Mom. You were my anchor. Now, let this be your shield. Love, David. I lowered the note. The silence in the motel room felt different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy with questions. Sovereign Trust? I had seen that building. It was a skyscraper downtown, all glass and steel. It was a place for millionaires, for people who wore suits that cost more than my car. Why would David send me there? I looked at the black card in my hand. It looked ominous, dangerous, almost. Was this legal? Was my son involved in something bad? David was a software engineer. He fixed computers, he built networks. He didn't have secret bank accounts. Doubt crept in. Maybe this was a delusion. Maybe he was sick in the head toward the end. I opened my own purse. I poured the contents onto the bed. 2 $20 bills, a handful of quarters. A crumpled receipt from the grocery store, $42 and some change. That was my net worth. The room cost $59 a night. I had paid for tonight. Tomorrow, I would have nothing. No food, no shelter, a burden, I whispered. The word tasted like ash. All these years, living in that house, cooking their meals, cleaning their clothes. Did I do it because I wanted to help? Or did I do it because I was afraid of this exact moment? Afraid of being alone with $42 in a cheap motel, I picked up the black card again. Your shield, David had written. I traced his signature on the back. It was the only thing that felt real. I stood up and walked to the window. I pulled back the dusty curtain. The rain was still falling, turning the parking lot into a sea of black oil. I saw a family in the room across the lot. A mother was unloading groceries from a beat-up car while a toddler clung to her leg. They looked tired. They looked poor. But they had each other. I was alone. But I had a mission. I tucked the black card into the safest place I knew, inside the lining of my bra, right against my skin. The metal felt cold, shocking my warm flesh. I folded the note and put it back in the hidden slot of the wallet. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Maybe the card would be declined. Maybe the bank security would laugh at me. Maybe Mr. Sterling didn't exist. But David had asked me to do one last thing. He had predicted Linda's cruelty. He had seen the future that I was too blind to see. If he was right about her, maybe he was right about this card. I lay down on the lumpy bed, fully clothed. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin. I clutched the shoebox to my chest like a teddy bear. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. I closed my eyes. "Okay, David," I whispered into the dark. "I'll go. Tomorrow, I would walk into the lion's den. Tomorrow, I would find out what my son had been hiding. For tonight, I just listened to the rain and waited for the sun to rise." The revolving doors of Sovereign Trust Bank spun with a heavy, expensive whoosh. I stepped inside. The air was freezing, chilled to a perfect temperature that kept the wealthy comfortable and the unwanted shivering. The lobby felt like a cathedral of money, high ceilings, polished marble floors, and a silence so deep you could hear a pin drop. I pulled my old gray cardigan tighter around my chest. I felt small. My shoes were scuffed, my suitcase was worn, and I knew exactly what the security guard by the door was thinking. He was waiting for an excuse to escort me out. I walked straight to the main desk. The young woman behind the glass, whose name tag read Jennifer, Senior Associate, didn't look up. She was busy typing, her manicured fingers flying across a silent keyboard. "Excuse me," I said softly. Jennifer stopped. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my frayed coat sleeves. Her smile was tight and professional, the kind used to dismiss people politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to see someone about an account," I said. "My son sent me." "Do you have an appointment?" "No." Jennifer sighed, a small puff of air through her nose. She reached for a slip of paper. "I'm sorry, but our advisors are booked. If you need to check a balance, the ATM is in the vestibule outside." She was dismissing me. Just like Linda, just like the rest of the world that saw an old woman as invisible. I reached into my purse. My hand trembled as I touched the cold metal of the card. "I don't need an ATM," I said, my voice shaking but firm. I pulled out the black card and laid it on the glass counter. It made a heavy, solid thud. Jennifer glanced at it casually, then froze. She blinked. She leaned closer. The polite condescension on her face evaporated, replaced by genuine confusion. There was no logo, no bank name, just the matte black finish and the silver chip. I need to swipe this," she stammered. She took the card gingerly, as if it might explode. She slid it through her reader. I held my breath. I expected a beep. I expected a rejection. Instead, the screen on her desk didn't make a sound. It flashed. A bright, pulsing red bar appeared on her monitor. Jennifer's face went pale. She pulled her hands away from the keyboard instantly. She looked at me, eyes wide with fear. "Mrs. Thorne?" she whispered. "Yes. Please. Don't move." She picked up her phone, pressed a single button, and spoke urgently into the receiver. "Code Phoenix. Front desk. Yes. She's here." Code Phoenix? Panic rose in my throat. Had David done something illegal? Was I about to be arrested? I looked toward the door, calculating if I could run. But before I could move, the double doors behind the teller line burst open. A man in a sharp charcoal suit marched out. He had silver hair and the authoritative stride of a man who owned the building. He ignored the other customers in line. He walked straight to me. He didn't look angry. He looked Hanster. Relieved. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, extending a hand. "I am Edward Sterling, the branch director. We have been expecting you." I stared at his hand, then at his face. "Expecting me? Please, come with me." Immediately, he guided me away from the staring eyes of the lobby, past the security guard who now looked confused, and into a private office at the back. The door clicked shut, cutting off the noise of the outside world. Mr. Sterling pulled out a leather chair for me. He moved with a sense of urgency. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk and placed the black card in the center, like a sacred artifact. "Mrs. Thorne," Sterling began, his voice grave. "When this card is swiped, it triggers a protocol your son established 6 months ago. It tells us that his primary safeguards have failed, and you are in need of immediate intervention." "I don't understand," I said, gripping my purse. I have $40 to my name. Linda kicked me out. She said David left nothing. Linda was wrong, Sterling said sharply. David anticipated her greed. That is why he separated his assets. He opened a file on his desk and turned a document toward me. David was an early pioneer in blockchain technology. He didn't just fix computers, he built security systems for digital currency. He liquidated his positions over the last year and moved everything into the Phoenix Trust. He pointed to a number at the bottom of the page. This trust is irrevocable. It is immune to divorce settlements, debt collection, and lawsuits. And you, Martha Thorne, are the sole beneficiary. I looked at the paper, the numbers blurred, then sharpened. $48,215,000. 00. I stopped breathing. The room spun. 48 million? I choked out. Yes, ma'am. As of this morning's market opening, I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I felt my knees give way, and I sank back into the chair, crushing the leather. It was too much. It was impossible. No, I shook my head, tears springing to my eyes. David drove an old car. He clipped coupons. He let Linda call him a loser. He was protecting the capital, Sterling said softly. He told me that if you were sitting in this chair, it meant he was gone, and you needed a weapon. A weapon? Money is a shield, Mrs. Thorne. But in the right hands, it is a sword. I covered my face with my hands, my son, my quiet, patient boy. He had walked through fire for years, hiding this mountain of gold, just to make sure I wouldn't be crushed when he was gone. Why didn't he tell me? I sobbed. I didn't need the money. I just wanted him to be happy. He knew that. Sterling opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. He left this for you, Sterling said, sliding it across the desk. He made me swear to give it to you only after the funds were verified. On the front, in David's messy, hurried scrawl, was a single word, confession. I stared at the envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. The fear of the bank was gone, replaced by a deeper, more painful ache. I wiped my eyes. I wasn't just a homeless widow anymore. I was the keeper of a secret worth $48 million. I reached out and took the letter. It felt heavy. Read it, Sterling whispered. He explains everything. My hands shook as I broke the wax seal. The paper inside was thick and folded with care. I recognized the scent immediately. It was the smell of the sandalwood soap David used. Even from the grave, he was still here. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was different from the hurried note in the shoebox. This was neat, deliberate. It was written by a man who knew he was running out of time. I took a breath. The air conditioner in Mr. Sterling's office hummed, but the sound faded away. There was only David's voice in my head. Dear Mom, if you are reading this, the worst has happened. Linda has shown her true colors, and I am no longer there to stand between you and her cruelty. I have so many secrets to confess, and the biggest one is this: we were never poor. Not in the last 5 years. I'm an engineer, Mom. I saw the potential of cryptocurrency before most people knew what it was. I invested early. I mined coins when they were worth pennies. Then, they became worth thousands. By the time I got sick, I was sitting on a fortune. I wanted to tell you. I wanted to buy you a villa in Florida. I wanted to take us all on a cruise. But then, 2 years ago, I found the bank statements. I paused. My heart skipped a beat. Bank statements? I found out Linda was opening credit cards in my name. She was draining our joint savings. And worse, I found out about the business trip she was taking. She wasn't working, Mom. She was seeing someone, a man named Greg. I hired a private investigator. I have the photos. I have the receipts. I gasped. A sound of pure shock escaped my lips. Linda? The woman who acted so perfect, so superior? I was going to divorce her. I was ready to leave. But then came the diagnosis, stage 4. The doctor gave me 6 months. I was dying, Mom. If I divorced her then, the court battle would have eaten up the remaining time I had with Leo. She would have fought dirty. She would have used Leo as a pawn. I couldn't put my son through that war while he was watching his father fade away. So, I made a choice. A hard choice. I chose to play the fool. I let her think I was weak. I let her think I was broke. I let her treat me like garbage because I was moving the chess pieces in the dark. I liquidated everything, every stock, every coin. I moved it all into the Phoenix Trust. I built an iron wall around this money. She can't touch it. Her lawyers can't touch it. The government can't touch it. And I put the key in the one place I knew she would never look. I put it in your hands. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. He did this alone. He endured her yelling, her insults, her spending, all while he was dying? Mom, I know you. I know you lie awake at night thinking you are a burden to me. I know you think you are just an extra mouth to feed. You were never a burden. You were my vault. You were the only person in this world who loved me for me, not for what I could buy. I knew Linda would kick you out the moment I was gone. I counted on her greed. Her greed was the trigger that activated this trust. So, here is the truth. This money isn't just for you to live comfortably. It is a weapon. I am not leaving you cash, Mom. I am leaving you a sword and a shield. The shield is for Leo. Ensure he has the best schools, the best life, and keep him away from the toxic environment his mother creates. The sword is for Linda. Don't hurt her. Just show her what happens when you underestimate a mother. Teach her that actions have consequences. I love you, Mom. You are stronger than you think. Wipe your eyes. Stand up. And go take back our dignity. Love, David. The letter ended. I sat there, staring at the signature. The paper was wet with my tears. For years, I had walked on eggshells. I had swallowed my pride when Linda criticized my cooking. I had stayed silent when she rolled her eyes at my stories. I thought I was weak. I thought I was just a passenger in their lives. But David hadn't seen a passenger. He had seen a warrior in waiting. He knew. I whispered. My voice was hoarse. He knew everything. He did, Mr. Sterling said softly. I looked up at him. The banker was watching me with a look of profound respect. He handed me a tissue box. He told me that you were the kindest woman he ever knew, Sterling said. But he also said that if you are pushed into a corner, you have a backbone of steel. He bet $48 million on that backbone. I took a tissue and wiped my face. I wiped away the grief. I wiped away the fear. And then, I wiped away the old Martha. The Martha who apologized for existing was gone. She died in the rain yesterday. I looked at the number on the document again. $48,215,000. This wasn't a lottery win. This was blood money. It was paid for by David's silence, by his suffering. He had sacrificed his peace to give me this power. If I used it to just sit on a beach, I would be insulting his memory. Mr. Sterling, I said. My voice didn't crack this time. It was steady. Yes, Mrs. Thorne? I need access to these funds. Immediately. Of course. I can issue you a temporary black card linked to the main account right now. And I will have a team of wealth management lawyers at your disposal by this afternoon. Good. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in my purse, right next to the old picture of David. I also need to hire a private investigator, I said. And I need to buy a house. But not just any house. Mr. Sterling smiled. It was a small, knowing smile. He leaned forward. Whatever you need, Mrs. Thorne, the bank is yours. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The arthritis that usually plagued my knees seemed to vanish. I smoothed down my cheap gray cardigan. It was still the same outfit, but it felt different now. It felt like a disguise. One more thing, I said, looking out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Linda was probably throwing away the rest of my things. She was probably laughing with her friends about how she got rid of the old baggage. Yes? I want everything kept confidential. Linda thinks I am destitute. I want her to keep thinking that. For a little while longer. Understood. Silence is often the loudest weapon. I picked up my purse. I picked up my suitcase. Mr. Sterling moved to help me, but I shook my head. I've got it, I said. I walked to the door. I didn't hunch my shoulders. I didn't look down at the floor. I opened the heavy door and stepped back out into the lobby. The security guard was still there. He watched me approach. This time, I didn't look away. I looked him right in the eye. He blinked and nodded respectfully. I walked through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the street. The sun had come out. The storm was over. I took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and coffee and opportunity. David had given me a sword, it was time to sharpen it. 3 weeks later, I was standing on the balcony of a 25th-floor apartment. The city of Seattle was spread out below me, a grid of lights twinkling in the twilight. It was quiet up here, the roar of the traffic was just a gentle hum. The wind was cool, but it wasn't the biting, freezing rain of the funeral. I took a sip of tea. It was Earl Grey, served in a cup that didn't have a single chip in the rim. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy a Ferrari. Mr. Sterling had suggested a penthouse, but I chose this. It was a serviced condominium in a secure building downtown. It had a doorman named Arthur who tipped his cap to me every morning. It had heated floors, but most importantly, it had walls thick enough that I couldn't hear my neighbors. Money, I realized, doesn't just buy things. It buys silence. It buys safety. It buys the luxury of not being afraid of the mailman bringing a bill you can't pay. I walked back into the living room. It was minimalist, decorated in soft creams and grays. A far cry from the cluttered, cozy house I had left behind. On the coffee table, there was a stack of files. For the last 20 days, I hadn't been shopping, I had been going to school. My teachers were Mr. Sterling and a team of tax attorneys. I learned about diversified portfolios, municipal bonds, and shell companies. At 58 years old, I was learning a new language. The language of power. David would be proud. I wasn't just hoarding his gift, I was managing it. I spent my mornings reading financial reports and my afternoons at the gym, walking on the treadmill, strengthening the legs that had almost given out under the weight of grief. I wasn't the old woman trembling in the rain anymore. I was becoming something else. But the most important file on the table wasn't about stocks. It was a manila envelope marked L.T. Surveillance. I sat down and opened it. The photographs spilled out. They were high resolution, taken with a long-range lens. There was Linda. She looked thinner, frantic. She was wearing a new designer dress, standing outside a nightclub. In another photo, she was at a car dealership, signing papers for a white convertible Mercedes. She was burning through David's life insurance policy. It was a modest policy, $50,000. But to her, it must have seemed like a fortune. She was spending it like water. And she wasn't alone. In almost every picture, there was a man. He was younger than her, perhaps in his 30s. He had slicked back hair and wore suits that were a little too shiny. Greg, the business partner. The boyfriend. I picked up the report from the private investigator, a man named Mr. Cole. His summary was brutal and efficient. According to Cole, Greg was not a businessman. He was a promoter. He had a history of failed ventures and 2 civil lawsuits for fraud in Nevada. He had convinced Linda that he had an insider opportunity in a new commercial real estate development. He promised her it would triple her money in a month. All she needed was capital. I looked at the picture of Linda laughing with him, her head thrown back, oblivious to the shark swimming next to her. She had abandoned her husband while he was dying to be with this man. And now, this man was going to eat her alive. My phone rang. It was Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Thorne, his voice was crisp. "We have an update on the property." I straightened up. "Go ahead, Edward." "The listing just went live on the MLS 10 minutes ago. 142 Oak Creek Drive. She's listed it as price to sell. She wants a quick cash closing." I closed my eyes. 142 Oak Creek Drive. My home. I could see it in my mind. The porch where David learned to ride a bike. The kitchen where we baked cookies every Christmas. The scratches on the doorframe marking Leo's height. Linda wasn't just selling a house. She was selling my memories to fund a scam. "What is the asking price?" I asked. She listed it at $450,000. "It's about 20% below market value. She is desperate for liquidity, Martha. The investigator says Greg is pressuring her to invest in his project by Friday." "She's rushing," I said. "She's making mistakes." "Correct. If we wait, we could probably get it for even less in a month." "When she gets desperate." "No," I said firmly. "I don't care about the price. I care about the house. I don't want strangers walking through David's study. I don't want an open house where people touch his books." I stood up and walked to the window again. The reflection in the glass showed a woman with silver hair, standing straight, her jaw set. "Buy it, Edward." "Very well. I will put the offer in immediately." We will use the Blue Heron LLC as the buyer, as we discussed. It will be a standard corporate purchase. She will never see your name on the paperwork. Good. I paused. I watched a ferry boat crossing the dark water of the bay below. And Edward? Yes? Make it a cash offer. Full asking price. But with one condition, immediate possession. I want the keys in 48 hours. She has to be out. That is aggressive, Sterling noted, though I could hear the approval in his voice. She will likely agree. She needs the money for Greg. That's the point, I said softly. I want to give her the rope. Let her have the money. Let her think she has won. Let her give it all to Greg. I understand. I'll draft the offer now. Thank you, Edward. I ended the call. I picked up the photo of Linda again. She looked so confident. She thought the world was hers for the taking. She thought she had discarded the useless mother-in-law and cashed out on the dead husband. She didn't know that the useless mother-in-law was now her buyer. She didn't know that the money she was about to receive was the bait in a trap. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my teacup. I dried it and placed it in the cabinet. Everything in its place. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Not really. Revenge is messy. This was about justice, and it was about rescue. I was rescuing my house. And soon, I would have to rescue my grandson. I went into the bedroom and opened the walk-in closet. Hanging in the back was my old gray coat. It still smelled faintly of the rain from the day of the funeral. I touched the sleeve. You're going home, Martha. I whispered to myself. We're taking it back. But first, I had to let Linda destroy herself. It was the only way she would learn. It was the only way the judge would see her for what she really was when the time came to fight for Leo. I turned off the lights in the apartment. The city glowed outside, cold and indifferent. But in here, in the dark, I felt a warmth growing. It was the warmth of control. I was ready. The notification on my iPad was brief. Escrow closed. Title transfer complete. It was done. I owned the house at 142 Oak Creek Drive. But Linda didn't know that. All she knew was that $450,000 had just hit her bank account. I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen. I could imagine the look on her face. The triumph. The relief. She probably felt like she had just won the lottery. She thought she had squeezed the last drop of value out of her dead husband's legacy. She didn't know she was holding fool's gold. According to Mr. Cole's surveillance reports, Linda didn't wait a single day. That afternoon, she met Greg at a sleek office building in the financial district. It was a rented workspace, the kind you can book by the hour. But to Linda, it looked like a headquarters. Cole sent me the audio recording from a bug he had planted in the waiting area. This is it, babe. Greg's voice was smooth, like oil. The Emerald Heights project, we have the permits. We have the land. We just need the bridge capital to break ground. Once the investors come in next month, your equity triples. Triples? Linda's voice was breathless. Are you sure? I'm betting my reputation on it. But we have to move fast. The buy-in window closes at 5. I listened to the silence on the tape. The silence of a predator waiting for the prey to step into the snare. I'm in, Linda said. I'm all in. She didn't just invest the money from the house. She went further. The report showed she maxed out 3 credit cards for administrative fees. She took a high-interest title loan on her new Mercedes. She scraped every account dry. She wanted to be rich. She wanted to be someone who didn't have to work, someone who could look down on people like me. She signed the papers. She wired the money, $450,000. Gone in a keystroke. For the next 2 weeks, Linda lived in a hallucination. She posted photos on social media constantly. Champagne brunches. New jewelry. Captions about boss lady and new beginnings. She was celebrating a victory that didn't exist. But while she was toasting to her future, my grandson was waiting in the past. The reports on Leo broke my heart. He was still at the boarding school 3 hours away. Linda hadn't visited him once since the funeral. Not once. Mr. Cole sent me a picture taken from outside the school fence. It showed Leo sitting on a bench during recess. Other boys were playing soccer. Leo was just sitting there, staring at his shoes. He looked so small, so defeated. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred. Hold on, Leo, I whispered, pressing my hand against the screen. Grandma is coming. I just need the monster to fall first. It was a cruel game. I hated it. Every instinct in me wanted to rush to that school and grab him. But Mr. Sterling had warned me, if you go now, she still has resources. She can fight you for custody. She can claim you are kidnapping him. You have to wait until she is broken. You have to wait until she has nothing left to offer the court. So, I waited. I watched. I let the anger simmer in my gut, turning into cold, hard resolve. Money is a tool, but patience? Patience is a weapon. The collapse happened on a Tuesday. It was exactly 18 days after the wire transfer. Linda drove to the office building in the financial district. She was probably going there to check on her profits, or maybe to plan the next vacation with Greg. But when she got to the 14th floor, the glass doors were locked. The gold lettering that said Vertex Capital was gone. Scraped off. I wasn't there, but Mr. Cole was. He described the scene in perfect detail. Linda knocked. Then she pounded. Then she started screaming. A janitor came by pushing a cart. He told her the company had moved out over the weekend. They had ended their lease. She called Greg. Straight to voicemail. She called again. And again. And again. By the 10th call, the operator message changed. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. She stood in the hallway, clutching her designer purse. Her knees buckled. She slid down the wall until she hit the floor. It wasn't just a bad investment, it was a ghost scam. A classic Ponzi scheme designed to strip a mark of everything in one go. Greg wasn't in the Bahamas. He was probably halfway to Eastern Europe, or maybe just in the next state with a new name and a new haircut. Linda drove to the police station. She filed a report, but the detectives just shook their heads. The money was wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was untraceable. Then came the dominoes. When you live on credit, the fall isn't a slide. It's a crash. The bank that held the loan on her Mercedes called. The payment bounced. The credit card companies called. Over the limit. The boarding school called. Tuition was overdue. I sat in my apartment, watching the sunset over the city. I held a file in my hand. It was the foreclosure notice for the rest of her life. She has nothing, Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Sterling told me on the phone that evening. She is technically insolvent. Her credit score just dropped below 500. And Leo? I asked. The school says they will have to send him home if the balance isn't cleared by Friday. Pay it, I said instantly. Pay the whole year. Anonymously. Done. And the house? It's empty. We have the keys. The locks are changed. I took a deep breath. The trap had snapped shut. The rat was caught. But I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound sadness that it had to come to this. Linda had destroyed her family for money, and now the money had destroyed her. She's going to come back, I said. When she realizes she has nowhere else to go. Yes, Sterling agreed. She will go to the only place she feels she has a claim to. The house. I'll be waiting. I hung up. I walked to the closet and pulled out the dress I had bought for this moment. It wasn't gray. It was navy blue, tailored, sharp. The kind of dress a woman wears when she is in charge. I looked at the shoebox on my shelf. The lead soldiers were still guarding the perimeter. We got her, David, I said to the empty room. The shield held. Tomorrow, Linda would find out that the world doesn't forgive greed. Tomorrow, she would knock on a door she used to own. And this time, I would be the one standing on the other side. It took exactly 60 days for the kingdom to crumble. I didn't have to guess what was happening. I didn't have to imagine it. I saw it all through the cold, objective lens of Mr. Cole's final reports. The crash wasn't graceful. It was violent. First, the Mercedes went. Linda was at a Starbucks, probably trying to keep up appearances, trying to network with people who had already stopped answering her calls. The tow truck driver didn't care about her screaming. He didn't care about her threats to sue. He just hooked the bumper, lifted the shining white convertible into the air, and drove away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk in her heels. Then, the apartment went. The luxury living she had bragged about was actually a month-to-month lease she couldn't afford. When the check started bouncing, the eviction notice was taped to her door. Bright orange. Humiliating. She had 48 hours to vacate. And the friends? The squad she used to go to brunch with? They vanished like smoke. I read the transcripts of her text messages that Cole had intercepted. Linda. Hey girl, I'm just having a little cash flow issue with the bank. Can I crash on your couch for a few days? Friend 1. Sorry, hun, we have guests. Friend 2. I think it's best if you don't contact me anymore. I heard about the fraud investigation. She was radioactive. In her world, poverty was a disease, and she was patient zero. 2 months ago, she had thrown me out like garbage. Now, the city was doing the same to her. I sat in the living room of 142 Oak Creek Drive. Yes, I was back. I had moved back in 3 days ago. The house was exactly as I remembered it, but also completely different. I had hired a cleaning crew to scrub every inch. I had removed Linda's gaudy modern art. I had put David's books back on the shelves. The house smelled of lemon and wax and peace, but outside, the storm was gathering for Linda. It was late afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain. My phone buzzed. It was Cole. She's moving, he said. She tried the Motel 6. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. In her desperation, she had remembered me, not because she missed me. Not because she was worried. She remembered me because she needed a lifeboat. She thought the old useless woman might have a few dollars saved from Social Security. She thought she could manipulate me one last time. Did she find anything? I asked. No, Cole replied. The clerk told her you checked out weeks ago. He told her you left in a Lincoln Town car. She didn't believe him. Where is she going now? She's walking, Mrs. Thorne. She has 2 suitcases and she's walking. She's heading towards Oak Creek. My heart did a strange, painful flutter. She was coming here. She was coming back to the scene of the crime. She didn't know I owned it. As far as she knew, she had sold it to a faceless corporation called Blue Heron LLC. Why come here? Because it was the last place she felt safe. Maybe she hoped the new owners hadn't moved in yet. Maybe she hoped to squat in the garage. Maybe she was delusional enough to think she could beg the new owners for a job. A maid, a cook, anything to get out of the cold. Let her come, I said. I hung up. I walked to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I peered through the slit. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then, I saw her. She didn't look like the woman who had shoved me out the door. That woman had been sharp, angular, terrifying. This woman was a ghost. She was dragging 2 suitcases that looked too heavy for her. One of the wheels was broken, making a scraping sound against the pavement. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Her hair, usually dyed a perfect platinum blonde, was showing dark roots. It was frizzy, matted from the humidity. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing jeans, and a wrinkled coat that looked like she had slept in it. She stopped at the bottom of the driveway. She looked up at the house. I saw her face clearly. It was gray. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed with red. She looked hungry. Not just for food, but for rest, for mercy. She stood there for a long time, shivering. The rain started to fall, just a light drizzle at first. It was poetic, cruel, but poetic. She had pushed me out into the rain with a suitcase. Now, she was standing in the rain with hers. She took a step up the driveway, then another. She looked terrified. She was trespassing. She knew she had no right to be here. I watched her walk past the rose bushes, the ones she had neglected, the ones I had just started to nurse back to health. She reached the porch. She hesitated. She raised her hand to the door. Her hand was shaking. She smoothed her hair, a pathetic attempt to look presentable. She took a deep breath, trying to summon the arrogance she used to wear like armor. But the armor was gone. She pressed the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound echoed through the house. It was a cheerful sound, completely at odds with the tragedy standing on the welcome mat. I stood in the hallway. I was 10 feet away from her. Only a piece of wood separated us. I smoothed my dress. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked calm. I looked like the owner of this house. I wasn't afraid. The old Martha would have been terrified. The old Martha would have worried about Linda yelling, about Linda making a scene. But I wasn't the old Martha. I was the shield. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time, more desperate. I heard a voice, muffled by the door. Hello? Linda called out. Her voice was cracked, thin. Is anyone home? Please. I just need to use the phone. Please. She was lying. She didn't need a phone. She needed a miracle. I walked to the door. My footsteps were silent on the hardwood floor. I reached out and unlocked the deadbolt, the same sound she had made when she locked me out, the sound of finality. I gripped the cold brass handle. I took a breath. This was for David. This was for Leo. This was for every mother who had ever been made to feel small by a child they sacrificed everything for. I turned the handle. I pulled the door open. The door swung open. Warm, golden light from the foyer spilled out onto the porch, cutting through the gray gloom of the rain. It illuminated Linda like a spotlight on a stage where a tragedy was about to end. She blinked, shielding her eyes against the glare. She was shivering violently. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black, jagged streaks. She looked like a drowned rat. "Hello," she rasped, squinting. I need help. Is the owner?" Then, her eyes adjusted, she stopped. Her mouth hung open, frozen in mid-sentence. She stared at me. I stood there in my navy blue dress, my hair perfectly coiffed, wearing the pearl necklace David had given me for my 50th birthday. I wasn't the hunched, weeping old woman she had shoved out 2 months ago. I stood straight. I took up space. For a moment, her brain couldn't process it. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible on her face. To her, I was trash. I was homeless. I was supposed to be dead in a ditch somewhere. "Martha?" she whispered. The name came out like a question. What are you doing here?" Her eyes darted past me, scanning the hallway. She was looking for the real owner. She probably thought I had broken in. Or maybe she thought I was the new maid. Did you get a job here?" she asked, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. "Is the owner home? I need to speak to them." I didn't move. I just looked at her with a calmness that felt like ice. "The owner is home, Linda," I said softly. "Well, get them." She snapped, her desperation making her impatient. "I don't have time for your slow. I am the owner." The silence that followed was heavier than the thunder rolling in the distance. Linda stared at me. She laughed. A short, nervous, hysterical bark of a laugh. "You? Don't be stupid. You don't have 2 nickels to rub together. You're living in a Motel 6. "I bought this house last month," I said. My voice was steady, factual. "I bought it from a woman who was desperate for quick cash, a woman who sold her husband's legacy to fund a scam." I stepped back and gestured to the interior. "Blue Heron LLC. That's me, Linda." Her face went white, all the blood drained from her skin, leaving her looking like a wax figure. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, gripping the doorframe for support. "No," she stammered. "No, that's impossible. David didn't. David was broke. David was never broke. He was just careful. You stole it!" she screamed. The explosion was sudden. The shock turned into rage instantly. She lunged forward, her face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "You stole my money. That was David's money. It was community property. It was mine." She tried to push past me, to storm into the house as if she could reclaim it by force. But she didn't get far. From the shadows of the living room, a man stepped forward. It wasn't Mr. Sterling. It was a private security guard I had hired for this exact moment. He was 6'4", broad-shouldered, and wearing a uniform that said he wasn't here to negotiate. He didn't touch her, he just blocked her path. A human wall. Linda stopped. She looked at the guard, then back at me. The rage evaporated, replaced by a terrified realization of her own powerlessness. She crumbled. She sank to her knees right there on the doormat. The wet fabric of her jeans soaked into the expensive rug. She started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. "Martha, please," she wailed. "I have nowhere to go. They took my car. They kicked me out of the apartment. I have nothing." She looked up at me, her hands reaching out to grab the hem of my dress. I stepped back, just an inch, keeping myself out of reach. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. I was stressed. I didn't mean to hurt you. We're family, Martha. Look at me. I'm Leo's mother. You can't leave family in the rain." "Family?" I repeated the word. It tasted bitter. "Yes. I'm your daughter-in-law. You ceased to be my family the moment you threw David's shoebox into the mud," I said. I looked down at her. It was strange. I expected to feel satisfied. I expected to feel happy seeing her on her knees. But I didn't. I just felt a deep, profound pity. She was so empty. She had defined herself by what she owned, and now that she owned nothing, she was nobody. You threw me out because you thought I had no value, I told her. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly over the sound of the rain. You called me extra baggage. You thought an old woman was useless. I leaned down slightly, so she could see my eyes. But David knew better. He knew that while you were loving his bank account, I was loving him. He knew that while you were planning your next vacation, I was the one holding this family together. I didn't know, she whimpered. You didn't want to know, I cut her off. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw a weak man and a weak mother. But you were wrong. I straightened up. David left everything to me, Linda. Not because he loved me more, but because he knew I was the only one who would use it to protect Leo. Leo, she breathed. Where is he? I need to see him. He is safe, he is still at school. And I have already paid his tuition for the next 5 years. I have also hired the best family lawyers in the state to petition for full custody. You can't take my son. She shrieked, struggling to stand up. You abandoned him, I said, my voice rising for the first time. It was a sharp, commanding tone that made her flinch. You left him in a boarding school and didn't visit him for 2 months because you were too busy chasing a con man. You drained his college fund. You sold his father's house. You are a danger to his future. I'm his mother. Then act like one, I said coldly. But you won't do it in this house. This house is a sanctuary. It is for people who love David. And you. You never loved him. Linda stood there, swaying. The truth hung in the air between us, undeniable. She knew it. I knew it. She looked around the foyer. She looked at the warm light, the polished floors, the life she had thrown away for a gamble that failed. Please, Martha, she whispered, her voice broken. Just for tonight, just the garage, anywhere. It's cold. It would have been easy to say yes. It would have been the Christian thing to do. But then I remembered the letter. I remembered David's words. The sword is for Linda. Teach her that actions have consequences. If I let her in now, she would never learn. She would think she could abuse people and then cry her way back into their good graces. She would think she could always manipulate me. I had to be the shield. And sometimes, a shield has to be hard. No, I said. Linda flinched as if I had slapped her. You have legs, Linda. You have your health. You are young. You can work. You can start over. But you cannot start over here. I nodded to the security guard. Please escort Miss Stevens off the property, I said, using her maiden name. If she returns, call the police for trespassing. The guard stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, his voice deep and final. Let's go. Linda looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in her eyes, only a vast, terrifying emptiness. She realized the game was over. The board had been flipped. She turned around. The guard walked her down the driveway. I watched from the doorway. I watched her drag those heavy suitcases back into the rain. I watched her figure grow smaller and smaller, disappearing into the dark, wet street. She was back where she started. But this time, she had no one to blame but herself. I stood there until she was gone. Until the only sound was the rhythm of the rain hitting the porch roof. I stepped back inside. I closed the heavy oak door. It was a solid sound, a safe sound. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door for a moment. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 months. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the release. It was done. The ghost was exorcised. I turned around and looked at my empty house. It was quiet. It was peaceful. I walked into the living room and picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the boarding school. Hello, I said when the receptionist answered. This is Martha Thorne. I'm Leo's grandmother. I would like to arrange to pick him up this weekend. We're going to have a long talk, and then we're going to have a proper dinner. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time in a long time, the fire was warm, and the monsters were gone. The threat came via text message 3 days after I kicked Linda off my porch. You think you won? He is my son. You will never see Leo again. I'm taking him to Nevada. It was a desperate lash-out from a cornered animal. The old Martha would have panicked. I would have called her, begged her, maybe even offered her money just to let me see my grandson. But the new Martha didn't panic. I just forwarded the screenshot to Mr. Sterling. Add it to the file, I told him, and call the judge. The custody hearing was 2 weeks later. It wasn't the dramatic screaming match you see in movies. It was quiet, it was sad, and it was brutally short. I sat on the right side of the courtroom, flanked by 2 of the city's best family law attorneys. Linda sat on the left. She had a public defender who looked overworked and tired. She wore a cheap suit that didn't fit, and her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. The evidence was a mountain. My lawyers presented the unpaid tuition bills from the boarding school. They presented the foreclosure notices. They presented the affidavits from the school counselor, stating that Leo had shown signs of severe emotional neglect and abandonment anxiety. And then, they presented the financial records of the Phoenix Trust. They showed that I had the means, the stability, and the intent to provide Leo with a life of security. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked at Linda. "Miss Stevens," the judge said, "you have no fixed address. You have no income. You have a history of financial instability and, according to these records, you haven't visited your son in 60 days. How do you propose to care for him?" Linda tried to argue. She cried. She talked about mother's rights. But the judge wasn't moved by tears. She was moved by facts. The court finds that it is in the best interest of the child to be placed in the primary custody of his grandmother, Martha Thorne. The gavel came down. Bang. It was the sound of a heavy door locking, keeping the wolves out forever. "Supervised visitation only," the judge added. "Twice a month. At a court-approved facility, pending a psychological evaluation." I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. I had him. He was safe. The drive to the boarding school the next day felt like the longest drive of my life. I pulled the Lincoln SUV up to the main gate. The autumn leaves were falling, covering the campus in a blanket of orange and gold. I saw him sitting on the steps of his dorm. He was wearing his school blazer, which was a size too small now. He was looking at the ground, kicking a pebble with his shoe. He looked so much like David at that age, it made my heart ache. I got out of the car. "Leo," I called out softly. He looked up, his eyes widened behind his glasses. He stood up slowly, as if he wasn't sure I was real. "Grandma?" I opened my arms. He ran. He didn't care about looking cool in front of his friends. He ran to me and buried his face in my coat. He smelled like chalk and little boy sweat and soap. He was shaking. "I thought you forgot me," he whispered into my shoulder. "Mom didn't come. Nobody came." "I know, baby. I know." I held him tighter, shielding him from the wind, shielding him from the world. "I didn't forget you. I was just fighting a dragon to get to you. But the dragon is gone now." "Are we going home?" he asked, looking up at me with wet eyes. "Yes," I said, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek. "We're going home. To Daddy's house." That night, 142 Oak Creek Drive wasn't quiet. It was alive. The television was on, playing cartoons. There were sneakers by the door. There was a half-eaten bag of chips on the counter. I made meatloaf and mashed potatoes, David's favorite, and now Leo's favorite. We ate at the kitchen table. For the first time in months, Leo laughed. It was a rusty, hesitant sound at first, but by the time we got to the ice cream, it was a real belly laugh. After he went to sleep in his father's old room, which I had redecorated with new posters and a comfortable bed, I went downstairs to the study. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me. He had brought the paperwork I asked for. "Are you sure about this, Martha?" Sterling asked, tapping the thick document on the desk. "Most grandparents just set up a standard college fund." "I'm sure," I said. I picked up the pen. This was the final piece of the puzzle. I had the money, but money is dangerous. I had seen what it did to Linda. It made her lazy. It made her entitled. It made her think she was better than everyone else. I wouldn't let that happen to Leo. I wouldn't let David's sacrifice turn his son into a spoiled brat. "Read the terms back to me one more time, Edward," I said. Sterling put on his reading glasses. "The Leo Thorne Trust," he read. "Beneficiary receives full tuition and living expenses for education. However, the principal lump sum is locked until age 25. "And the condition?" I prompted. "Condition 4.2. The beneficiary must provide proof of gainful employment for at least 2 consecutive years post-graduation. He must demonstrate the ability to support himself independently before he can access the family wealth. Good, I nodded. It's strict, Sterling noted. He might resent it when he's 21 and wants a sports car. Let him resent it, I said, signing the bottom line. David didn't leave me this money to buy Ferraris. He left it to buy freedom. Leo needs to learn the difference. I handed the papers back. He needs to know that he is loved, I said, looking at the ceiling, thinking of the little boy sleeping upstairs. But he also needs to know that he is capable. If I just give him everything, I steal his ambition. I won't do that to him. The phone rang a week later. It was Sunday evening. The designated time. I accepted the call. It was a video call, monitored by a social worker on the other end. Linda's face appeared on the tablet screen. She looked different. The expensive highlights were gone, grown out into a dull brown. She was wearing a uniform, a bright orange polo shirt with a logo for a diner chain called Big Burger. She was in a break room somewhere. I could hear the clatter of dishes and shouting in the background. "Hi, Leo," she said. Her voice was tired. She looked 10 years older. "Hi, Mom," Leo said. He was sitting next to me on the sofa. He didn't sound angry. He just sounded distant, like he was talking to a stranger he used to know. How is school?" Linda asked, glancing nervously at the timer on her screen. "It's good. Grandma helps me with math. We're building a robot." That's nice." Linda looked at me. For a second, our eyes met through the screen. There was no arrogance left in her, just a deep, crushing regret. She saw the warm living room behind us. She saw the fire in the fireplace. She saw the peace she had forfeited. "I have to go," Linda said suddenly. "My shift is starting. I love you, Leo." "Bye, Mom," Leo said. The screen went black. Linda was working double shifts in Nevada, serving burgers to truckers, trying to pay off debts that would likely follow her for decades. She was living the hard life she thought she was too good for. I put the tablet down. "Grandma?" Leo asked. "Can we go back to the robot now?" I smiled. I ruffled his hair. "Yes, we can. I wasn't just his grandmother anymore. I was his father and his mother. I was the keeper of the gate." The storm was truly over. The house was strong, and the legacy was safe. "The roses are finally blooming, David. They are exactly the shade of red you promised me. Deep, velvety crimson. You used to tell me that when you made your first million, you would hire a gardener to plant 100 bushes for me. You said you wanted me to have a garden where I could sit and drink my tea and not worry about the grocery bill. Well, you kept your promise. It just took a little longer than we thought." I snipped a dead leaf off the nearest bush. Snip. The sound was crisp in the quiet morning air. "It has been 3 years. 3 years since the rain. 3 years since the Motel 6. 3 years since the day I thought my life was over." I straightened up and rubbed my lower back. I'm older now. The aches are a little sharper in the mornings, but it's a good kind of tired. It's the tired that comes from working in the soil, not the tired that comes from carrying the weight of the world. I looked across the lawn. Leo was sitting at the patio table. He is 13 now. He has shot up like a beanstalk, all elbows and knees. He was bent over a mess of wires and circuit boards, soldering iron in hand. He doesn't play with lead soldiers anymore. Now, he builds drones. He has your concentration, David. The way he bites his lower lip when he's trying to connect 2 tiny wires. It's like looking at a ghost. But a happy ghost. "Grandma?" he called out, not looking up. "Do we have any more electrical tape?" "Top drawer in the garage, Leo. Next to the toolbox." "Thanks." He scrambled up and ran toward the garage. He didn't walk, he ran. He moved with the lightness of a child who knows he is safe. He knows that tonight there will be dinner. He knows that tomorrow he will go to school. He knows that no one is going to scream at him or tell him he is too expensive. I watched him go, and I felt that familiar warmth in my chest. The shield was holding. I sat down on the stone bench beneath the old oak tree. I took off my gardening gloves and picked up my cup of tea. My phone buzzed on the bench beside me. It was an email from the office. Subject: The David Thorne Foundation. Monthly Grant Review. I smiled. "I didn't keep all the money, David. I know you gave it to me to protect us, and I did. I invested well. The principal is safe. Leo's future is secured until he is an old man. But $48 million is too much for one old woman and a boy. Money is like water. If you keep it stagnant, it rots. You have to let it flow. So, I built a river. The David Thorne Foundation. We don't build statues. We don't put our names on hospital wings. We work in the shadows. Just like you did. We find them. The elderly, who have been tricked out of their homes by greedy children. The wives who are trapped in marriages because their husbands control every cent. The mothers who are sleeping in their cars because they chose to feed their kids instead of paying rent. We find them. And we give them a sword and a shield. Last week, we helped a woman named Sarah. She was 70. Her son had forged her signature and sold her farm. She was living in a shelter. I went to see her myself. I didn't tell her I was a millionaire. I just sat with her, held her hand, and told her she wasn't stupid. I told her she wasn't a burden. Then, my lawyers stepped in. We got her farm back. When she cried and asked how she could ever repay me, I just gave her a picture of you. I said, don't thank me. Thank David. He's the one who gave me the sword. That is my job now. I am the cleaner of messes. I am the restorer of dignity. I took a sip of tea. It was still hot. People think that money changes you. They say it makes you cold. They say it makes you forget where you came from. They are wrong. Money didn't change me. It just revealed me. It stripped away the fear. When you aren't afraid of starving, when you aren't afraid of being homeless, you have the space to be who you really are. I realized that for 30 years, I was a doormat because I was afraid. I let Linda treat me like dirt because I thought I needed her. I thought I had no choice. Money gave me the power of no. And once you learn to say no to the things that hurt you, you can finally say yes to the things that heal you. I don't hate Linda anymore. Truly. I don't. She is still working at that diner in Nevada. I send a check to her landlord every month to make sure she has a roof over her head. She doesn't know it's from me. She thinks it's a government subsidy. If she knew it was me, she would probably try to sue for more. Or she would hate herself. I don't do it for her. I do it for Leo. I want him to know that his mother is not on the street. But I will never let her back in. Forgiveness doesn't mean opening the door again. Forgiveness means letting go of the anger so you can sleep at night. But you keep the deadbolt locked. That's wisdom. Grandma. Look. Leo came running back from the garage, holding a small drone with 4 spinning propellers. I got it working. Watch. He set it on the grass. He tapped a command on his tablet. The little machine buzzed to life. It lifted off the ground, wobbly at first, then steadying itself. It rose higher, hovering above the rose bushes. Look at it go! Leo cheered. Dad would have loved this, right? My throat tightened. Yes, honey, I said softly. He would have loved it. I looked up. The drone was buzzing against the backdrop of a bright blue sky. High above, a hawk was circling. I looked past the drone. I looked past the hawk. I looked into the infinite blue. I know you are there, David. I know you were watching me that day in the rain. I know you were holding my hand when I walked into the bank. I know you were guiding my pen when I signed the trust deeds. You spent your life suffering in silence to give me this peace. You took the pain so I wouldn't have to. I want you to know that it wasn't in vain. I am not just the old lady with a suitcase anymore. I am the matriarch. I am the gardener. I looked at the roses again. They were strong. They had thorns. Beautiful, sharp thorns to protect the delicate blooms. That is the lesson, isn't it? To the women listening to my story, to the mothers who are giving everything and receiving nothing. Hear me. Love is not about being weak. Love is not about letting people walk all over you. Blind love is a danger. It leaves you naked in the storm. You must love with your eyes open. You must build your own shield. You must have something that is yours, a secret account, a skill, a boundary that no one is allowed to cross. Don't wait for a black card to save you. Save yourself. Be your own phoenix. Rise from the ashes before you are burned to the ground. I put my teacup down on the bench. A gentle breeze blew through the garden, rustling the leaves of the oak tree. It sounded like a whisper. I love you, Mom. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. A single tear escaped, but it wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of gratitude. I smiled. I'm okay, David, I whispered to the wind. We're okay. Leo, I called out, standing up. Come inside. It's time for lunch. I made sandwiches. Coming, Grandma. I watched him land the drone. He picked it up carefully and walked toward me. He looked happy. He looked free. I took his hand. We walked back toward the house. The house that belongs to us. The door was open, and this time, it would stay open for love, and locked for everything else. The story you just heard has had its names and locations changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone out there will pause and reflect, how many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? Honestly, I wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you speak up and fight to reclaim your voice? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story from Grandma's Secrets, or any feedback you have that could help us make our content even better. God always blesses the brave, and I truly believe courage leads us toward better days. For now, I'm leaving 2 of the most loved stories from our channel on the end screen. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next.